And now we're going to move to our final session for today, which is the second part of planning and design of project, which is the research and project design. So if you'll give me a moment, I will pull up my slides. Thank you. So for the final session, we have three wonderful speakers. We have Annalise Keys. She's the operations director of PlantVillage and the current and emerging threats to crops innovation lab. Her background is in agricultural and biological engineering with a focus on food and bioprocesses and international agriculture. We have with us Dr. Angela Records, who you heard from earlier. She is the science advisor and deputy lead of the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security Research Community of Practice. She's got her PhD in plant pathology, and she's the program manager for the lab. And we also have Winkit Mukami. She's from DT Agro Consultancy. She's the lead of the lab's presence in Kenya, and she's a field extension officer and a researcher in Kenya. So with that, I will pass it on.
Thank you, Calista. I think, Angela, you were to go first, yes. And you didn't have slides, so we might want to close the slides for now.
Yeah, I'm actually going to share my screen. I do have slides.
Sorry about that, a lot of moving pieces.
And okay, are folks able to see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great. So thanks again for the invitation to speak today. And the organizers asked me to talk a little bit about project design, sort of from the high level and kind of what donors look for in terms of project design. And so I'll speak for what I've seen at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and of course other donors do things a little differently, but I'll talk about it from the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security sort of perspective and the key elements for research activities. So the first thing I think is useful is to just kind of talk about how we define research in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security. And I think it's a broadly understandable definition. Really that research activities meet three fundamental criteria. The first is that it's hypothesis driven, testable, and independently replicable. That the work is purpose-driven with clear pathways to application and impact, and that it's rigorous and implemented with scientifically validated methods. And there is some more text here talking about what is not research, and I think these slides will be available and you could take a look at that in terms of what USAID considers research, and then sort of different activities that kind of related to research but aren't necessarily considered research themselves. And so I just thought I'd talk just really quickly, give you a bit of a preview of the forthcoming global food security research strategy, because here in this document that'll be coming out very soon, we highlight three themes of just sort of research activities that the Feed the Future program will continue to invest in or begin to invest in going forward. So just broadly speaking. So the first theme is around climate smart agricultural innovation. And as David very eloquently explained earlier today, climate change is such a critical challenge for all of us. And it's particularly challenging in the area of current and emerging threats to crops. So this broad category of research is around identifying practices and technologies that reduce emissions, sequester carbon, and all of these things while offering opportunities to meet our goals, our broad resilience, nutrition, equity, and economic goals. So kinds of examples of opportunities in this space around harnessing soil microbes to improve soil structure, digital tools that can connect remotely sensed information with researcher generated and user source inputs. There's a range of ideas that can kind of fall under this category of research themes. And then the second theme is around nutrition and food systems. And so broadly, the food system, some of the challenges that we face are around, reducing food loss and waste, food safety. And again, these slides are available so you can kind of look through some of the ideas that we have here and our current activities. And I didn't highlight this on the previous slide, but we have ongoing research activities in the innovation labs that are relevant to these different themes. And I've kind of listed those on these slides as well. And then lastly, the third theme that we're highlighting is genetic improvement. So breeding for improved crops and livestock, particularly relevant to this group would be, breeding for resistance to diseases and tolerance to pests. And so just kind of transitioning a little bit, and this is something that came up in a previous session around the theory of change, and how critical it is kind of a difficult thing to kind of nail down in an application, but it's really important in terms of just planning and project design and thinking about what the results, the impact that you want to make, and how you get there. So it's a really simple concept, just the thinking behind how a particular intervention will bring about the results. And so all of our proposals and our projects are centered around a theory of change. And it's basically just outlining what are the inputs and the activities that you're going to do, what outputs will come from that, and then what outcomes will develop from those particular outputs and how that'll achieve impact. And so just to kind of put it in, that was kind of a generic view, but just kind of to put it in a frame that's relatable. I just have a slide here of the Global Food Security Strategies Results Framework. And this is just a way of looking at, okay, our broad goal, high level, is to sustainably reduce poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. And this just kind of outlines how we think we can get there. So with three major objectives, one around inclusive, sustainable, agriculture-led economic growth, because we know that agriculture-led economic growth is critically important, and strengthen resilience among people and systems, and then a well-nourished population, especially among women and children. And so to achieve those objectives, if you take a step down, there are results that we would like to achieve, intermediate results. And I won't go over all of this, but the idea here being that we want to set up our projects with the goal in mind, and then lay out how we're going to get to that goal. And it's important that we're able to measure success along the way. And as has been pointed out already, this doesn't happen overnight, especially when you're doing research, right? So it's a long time horizon. And so the idea here is to lay out the path, and then what are the steps that you're going to take, and how do we measure along the way to show that we are successful. And so to do that, the Feed the Future program and the way we kind of measure success along the way is using indicators. The Feed the Future indicators is what all of the programs that are receiving Feed the Future support have to report against. And you can, if you just Google Feed the Future indicators, there's a nice handbook that lists them all and explains what they are. But basically, this is just the tool that we use to measure progress. And this is measured broadly against the Feed the Future results framework. And just to point out, basically the idea here is that not only do we measure that the work that we're investing in is having success, but it also helps us explain to our donors, which are the taxpayers, the work that we're doing and how we know that those dollars are being spent effectively. And the last slide I have is I just wanted to mention something that's a little bit of a tangent, but not really, which is the product lifecycle framework. And so this is something that, we're increasingly including in our calls for proposals. We're calling for applicants to articulate how they're really thinking about the end game when it comes to technology development. And so the idea here is simply that if you're developing a technology, you need to have an idea of how you're doing the research, but how, once the technology is developed, how is that going to reach the consumer, the farmer, the customer, whoever it might be, and just sort of how having a plan for that eventual uptake of the technology. So this involves, sort of market segment analysis. It could be something like if you're developing a disease-resistant plant, you're developing it in a breeding line that is, a variety that consumers prefer, that farmers like to grow, that people like to eat, et cetera. So really just sort of thinking from the very beginning, before the research starts, how those technologies and innovations are going to be used in the end. And so these are just some of the broad strokes of kind of what we're looking for when we're looking at project design. And I think colleagues in this session will give some more specific details. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to pass, I think, to Annalise.
Great. Thank you, Angela. Callista, will you share the slides? Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the actual 7 steps of project design now moving forward. And we've heard a lot about all the different components that are required to have a really solid foundation for your project. But from my perspective, I'm coming at this with a background that's focused in both research and operations. So I had a unique experience of being able to train as an academic and an engineer. And so I can take both of those learnings, the adaptability and flexibility of operations, and also not letting perfection be the enemy of good when it comes to research, and combine that into the 7 steps of project design. And I will mention that like any solid start to a project, it's important to research the knowledge and work that has previously been done in this area, and to understand how you can supplement and bring new knowledge into this field. And so for this slide specifically, I implemented that strategy and had cited Asana at the bottom of the slide. They're an excellent resource when it comes to all aspects of project design, project management. I would strongly recommend visiting their site if you're curious about the technology that you can use and that is available to you. So I'll go through the next 7 steps then. So just as a fundamental understanding, so we're all on the same page, project design is an early phase of the project lifecycle where ideas, processes, resources, and deliverables are planned out. A project design comes before the project plan, as it's a broad overview of where we want the project plan to go and include more detailed information there. So when we talk about the first step, which is defining your project goals, this is an important step to create ideas around your goals and deliverables. And so you want to, of course, consider the needs of the project itself and of your stakeholders. You want to consider your clients and who your team will be impacting outside of the deliverables. So you can think about your first range of impact and who are your direct stakeholders, but then also take it to the second or tertiary phase where you're thinking about who the area you're going to be working in, the people you'll be hiring potentially, and just the general community you'll be influencing, whether it's directly on the ground or in a virtual space as well. And you want to include SMART goals here. So making sure we're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. I'll talk in a later session, I believe tomorrow, about the different goal structure that we use at the Innovation Lab and how we use a combination of commitment style goals and also aspirational goals to achieve really big ideas. And so The other thing I would suggest when you're in this phase of your project design is to take advantage of the resources you have available to you just by having an internet connection and to use technology and not be afraid of it. Sometimes I know that I'm a fan of continuing to use pen and paper when I'm really in the beginning of brainstorming something out, but there are plenty of resources out there that can really help you mind map the different ideas you have and bring them all together then at one stage. And so then the next step of project design is to determine your outcomes. And in this phase, you really want to focus in and narrow down to your baseline outcomes. And so this is a stage where you're going to identify your outcomes for the project itself and to look into and explore the different project planning methods as well. Well, the tip I would have here is to focus on what you're measuring when you're looking at your outcomes. An outcome can go from harmful to helpful just by changing the lens in which you view it, or rather changing how you're measuring that outcome. And so it's really important to consider each aspect and perspective of the outcome you're looking to achieve. And again, taking it back to that project goal of what communities am I impacting and who am I leaving out of this project as well. So the next step would be to identify your risks and constraints. So this include evaluating your resource risks. So you want to evaluate the aspects of your project that could lead to risk further down the line. This could be specific to the environment you're working in. It could be specific to human health, to your team or group even. I know we've talked a lot about equity, and so we want to ensure we're bringing that along through from the start of project design and continuing it as well, and also considering mental health when it comes into the project itself. And then when you also want to consider the risk to the stakeholders that they're taking on, just for an understanding of what their perspective is when they look and meet with you about your project. And so just a general tip is to, at this stage, really take a step back and try and holistically view your project and get a whole perspective and think about who is in the project and gain feedback from those people as well. And feel free to gain feedback from others. This is a part where you want to focus on solutions rather than the problems as well. So it is expected and understood that you will encounter problems and there are risks associated with each project. But if you remain solution focused and intend to address them in line with your values or your mission statement of the organization, then it will be seen that you have a general competence to overcome these challenges. So the next step then is to refine your strategy overall. And one of the biggest tips here is to create a visual roadmap. If you're reading through your project design or you have different steps, and at any stage, if you're confused as the writer, it's guaranteed that anyone else who reads the project or donors will be 10 times more confused. And so an example of the visual roadmap could actually go back to what Angela had shared just earlier with the results framework. And so you could see she had the outcomes and then your intermediate results and your activities at which you're going to achieve these outcomes and goals. And so it's always good to draw out that visual roadmap to also catch yourself if there is a large gap in your theory. And so this is also, as was stated in an earlier session, a good time to reach out to your project donors or others in your space if you want feedback on your proposal or your project itself. So this could be, at this point, you have the base for each of the steps to build a foundational project, and they can provide feedback that would help you dictate along the way what the goals are and how to precisely talk about them. So then after refining your strategy, you're going to want to focus on estimating your budget. And so in this area, it's just good to identify the aspects of your budget up front that can be reduced or eliminated in case the donor requests. So there's always room for negotiation, especially if a donor really appreciates or enjoys the aspects of your proposal and believes that there's a strong reason to fund it, but in some cases that sometimes funding just doesn't work out the way we want it to. And even on the donor side, it can be a bit tricky. So there can be cases where there's a little bit of room for negotiation back and forth. And so it's good to understand where you can maybe cut your budget a little bit up front, so that you're best prepared for this situation and you can adapt appropriately. And so just as we talked about earlier, where you're including adaptability and flexibility in your proposal and project throughout each of these steps, including in the budget is also very important as well. So step 6 then is to create a contingency plan. This is built off of step 3, where you're identifying your risks and constraints. And so we're basically taking the risks we identified in step 3 and identifying how we're going to address them. This is important to include, again, being adaptable and flexible, recognizing that there are different challenges and obstacles that can come up along the way, whether they're small or local to the area you're working in. One example could be if you're doing a agricultural research plot and you're expecting to have crop growth and then there's no rain for the next 2 months. That's something you need to be adaptable to and adjust, because your results at the end of the season will be different. And then it can go as large as something that's absolutely international, like the COVID-19 pandemic, and being able to adapt with your team. And again, in this aspect, being extremely communicative with not only your team members, the communities you're in, but also your donors is really important to include them in what you're planning and what you're thinking, because they can also offer help in this area as well. There's a lot of experience in this room and also in the circles that you're working in to help adapt to these changing situations. And so then the last step is to document your milestones. And so this is focused on tracking your deliverables and timeline. It's important to think about ahead of what you want to document specifically. And this can be a general baseline of what your outcomes are, but also to think about, what does the donor organization typically highlight? Do they have a blog? Do they have social media? Are they interested in what's happening on the ground? And so you can think and keep in mind, well, maybe along this project, we'll keep two strong anecdotal stories or personal life stories that are changed to make a larger impact, or to include with our data. So we can report and publish a paper and also publish a blog in relation to that paper to get both aspects of the audience, both academia and the donor and philanthropic funding. So those are the 7 steps of project design. And luckily this is recorded and will be shared so we can come back to it as well. Calista, if you could go to the next slide, I'll just cover the key points for success when it comes for project design. And so for me, this really comes from over communicating, having team alignment, and visual monitoring of project success. So for over communicating, you really want to just communicate with everyone, and it is, in my opinion, better to be told to stop updating as often rather than be told you aren't communicating enough. And based on the different project management approaches you implement, this could be a very easy thing to achieve, and you can incorporate communication into each step of the project updates, so you don't even have to consider whether you're communicating enough or not. And then you want to ensure that your team is aligned on the goals and that everyone understands the project thoroughly, the values of the project and mission overall. And the way the Innovation Lab works is we believe that everyone needs to be able to address and answer the questions for themselves. What are the top 3 things that you can do that no one else can on this project specifically, which promotes accountability and also personal value towards the project. And then the last one is just to use visual elements to track your progress for a quick snapshot on the success and easy sharing of progress on your project. It also enables you to see very quickly where you're blocked and when you need to adapt to different situations. At this point, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to me, and I will hand it off to my colleague, Winkit.
We can't hear you.
You're muted again, Winkit.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me right
Yes.
now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so, sorry for that. Thank you for this opportunity. Okay, I'm going to talk about the actual reality on the ground, on what happens when you have the plan and the plan does not go as you had written. So, like for example, I'm going to talk about the examples as part of the innovation lab in Kenya of what we did when the plan we had, when the plan we have written and the actual reality in the ground does not match. Like, for example, on this slide, we had, in the proposal, it was that release parasitoids on only 250 fields. But coming to the ground, to the reality is that most of these fields, depending on the need of those farmers, needed more parasitoids. And we found ourselves releasing more than 250 fields with the parasitoids. Like this number, we have 764 fields. And in these, when the work plan you have does not go as planned, you have to be flexible. In that, we were able to increase the number of personnel who are involved in the production of the parasitoid. As you can see in this picture, you can see the number of personnel was increased so that you can be able to produce more parasitoids in the lab. And also, this is one of the fields we were able to produce the parasitoid in the one of the treatment fields. Next slide, please. As I'm continuing giving the examples of how flexible you have to be, there is another example of the provision of beans to most of our farmers. As in the beginning, we were able to just map and collect data of the specific farmers who need the maize and the beans. But coming to the input distribution, you find that most of the farmers, they were really asking, why are there some farmers who are being provided with this and this, and not me as a farmer? So in that, we were able to sit down and come up with a way of providing to more than 90% of the farmers with the intercrop. The next slide, please. Okay, on this slide, this is also another example of how you're supposed to be flexible on how you're supposed to do when it comes to whatever you've planned and whatever it is in the reality. So in this presentation, you find that during the usual norm of the farmers, whereby most of them, they rely mostly on the fertilizers, mostly the inorganic fertilizer. Most of the African farmers, most of them, they depend on the inorganic fertilizers so that they can be able to plant their crops. But coming to understanding of other fertilizers, for example, the organic fertilizers like the biochar, which has more benefits to the farmers, and also it's more environmental friendly to those fields. We find that we were able to restructure everything and come to conclusion and to explain to farmers what is the importance of us having the biochar, introducing it into their fields, how will it help you? And during the input distribution, when we were able to distribute the inputs and discuss with the farmers, which is the importance of having these organic fertilizer in their fields, it was a good way of enabling the farmers to be able to adopt the technology. So I can say that if we are having a work plan, we already have the work plan. It's good and it's best to be flexible in order to be able to incorporate the need which comes up, the need of both the farmers and also those who are beneficiary of that innovation lab. It's best to be flexible in order to be able to in order to be able to fit and to bring better results in the innovation in the technology you're having, the innovation lab technology you're having to those farmers. So those were my 3 slides of the actual reality of some of the examples of what we are doing in Kenya on the IPM packages. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we are open for Q&A. So we have one question so far, which is, what are the best tools for monitoring projects?
I can take this one. So I'm I'm biased in what I believe that some of the best tools are because of the management function that we follow in the Innovation Lab and PlantVillage as a larger whole. And so we use the objectives and key results structure. It is focused on being adaptable to the changes that happen when you're doing research and also operations, and it allows you to be hyper focused on your goals and activities and how you're going to achieve them. So you can really, I'll go into this in more depth tomorrow in our session. I believe it's session 7 or 5, and but I know it's tomorrow. And we'll go into how to develop OKRs. I'll even do a little example with the audience at the time to demonstrate why it's important and how you can think about the different ways to measure your different activities and outcomes. But for my answer, I would say objectives and key results, or any framework that enables you to track your goal and the progress at the same time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anybody, Winkett or Angela, do you have anything to add to that? No, it's okay if you don't. Okay, so we don't have any questions, but maybe we wait a couple minutes to see if anybody from the audience has any questions. This is your opportunity.
There's a hand raised, Kalista.
Okay, we'll try to we'll try to allow that person to talk. We've had some issues in the past. So Victor, I'm going to allow you to speak. I'm not sure how to unmute you. Okay, you're good to go. If you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak. You're still muted. If you're unable to talk, just please type your question into the Q&A or the chat. Are you not able to unmute yourself? Okay, it doesn't look like it's working.
Maybe you can make him a panelist.
Okay. I promoted him to a panelist, or I tried to. Oops. Okay, I'm not able to do that. Maybe Renee will have to do that.
Yep, it's in progress.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, you're right.
Okay, we do have a question coming through. Oh, sorry.
No, I just remembered when you promote someone to a panelist in a webinar, it makes them close out of Zoom and then they join back in as a panelist. So eventually they'll be back.
Okay. In the meantime, let's, oh, David, you've got your hand raised as well.
Yes, am I allowed to ask questions? I have a question.
Okay.
A question for Winked. So you talked very well about the adaptability and things changing, the increase in the size. I know also there were some challenges around the drought or destruction of the fields with heavy rain. How did the team members respond to all of these? Could you speak to the responses by the people on the ground who had to adapt quickly to these changing circumstances? Thank you.
Okay, to answer your question, David, when it comes to the team members on the ground, first they have to ask so many questions of what are you introducing? How will it benefit the farmer? What will be the outcome? So that they can have the confidence of going to those farmers and talking to them and being able to convince them that this is doable, we can do it, and the results will be better. So that is how I can answer that question.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we got another question for Winkit. It seems like you had to make several changes to the project. How long did it take to get approvals from the funders? And was there a need for clarifications or a discussion on why you were requesting the reviews to be done? So please share your experience with that.
Okay, to answer that question, okay, being the lead in Kenya, I had first to communicate with our director, who is David, so that from there, he was able to give us a go ahead. But actually, I can say that it did not take a lot of time for us to be able to change and implement those changes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another question for Winkit. How did your team adapt to continuous environmental, socioeconomic changes as living in Africa while implementing your project? Winkit, did you hear the question?
Yes, I had your question. I'm trying to interpret and digest that question so that I can be able to get a clear answer for that.
Okay, take your time.
I can give Winkit some time by answering a little bit more on the question previously, where she was able to answer on the adaptability of the project from the ground perspective. From our perspective as being the management entity for the award, we really want to emphasize the local ownership of the project. And so we give our subordinees all of the information they need up front. So what you can and cannot use the award money for, what are your restrictions and limitations, what do we expect from you? And then through our weekly meetings, and we use the OKR structure, we're able to stay updated on the progress of the projects along the way without being too hands-in or involved and restricting the subordinees in any way. And then from a rules and regulations standpoint, we have a wonderful administration assistant, Melissa Ishler, who is with us today, who stays on top of the invoices that are coming in from the subordinees and is able to answer all of their questions within 24 hours usually. So we're pretty on top of following up and staying very communicative with all our subordinees. And then logistically, as long as the budgets aren't changing, I think the rule is you cannot change, if you're changing less than 10% of where your budget is or where your spending allocation is, then you don't need prior approval from us. But otherwise, if you do need to change more than that, we will just ask for a simple write-up on why, what you're changing and where it's coming from, and that's usually sufficient.
Thank you, Annalise. Winkett, do you want to answer the question, or do you need more time?
Kindly on that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kindly on that. Just give me a few more minutes. I'll be able to type my answer back. Kindly.
Okay. Yes. Feel free to just type the answer instead if you don't want to answer live. We do have a question for Annalise. Thanks so much for your great presentation. Where did you take the photo of the beautiful camels?
I just responded in the chat. So I'm very honored and grateful to have received this image from one of our colleagues in Kenya. His name is Tyson Yasin. He was a key component in our desert locust response in 2019 and 2020, and has many wonderful pictures that we highlight on the website. But he's currently working with the Dream Team Agro Consultancy in Samburu County, focused on working directly with pastoralist communities as a different project. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. So we're coming up on 10 o'clock. So I think we are complete for today. Again, we'll continue to answer questions as we're able to. If we didn't get to your question, we will definitely try to do that after the session is over. So thanks everybody for a great day, and we will see you tomorrow. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And I don't know if any from the management team want to say anything in conclusion before we conclude.
Well, just once again, Calista, to thank you for your excellent work, but also the broader team at MSU, Renee and others. It's been fantastic start. It's been really, really engaging and wonderful to hear all of these questions coming in at a rapid pace. I think in every session we ran out of time because we didn't have, which is a great indicator. So thank you so much, everybody who participated, the MSU team, and tomorrow we'll be back again for some more good stuff on project management. Thank you so much indeed, everybody.
Thank you to you, David, and everybody. Yeah, this was great. Thank you, Calista.
Thank you
I think
all.
it worked out really good. Thanks. Huh?
Really did.
See you tomorrow then at same time, right, Calista? Same exact time, right? Yeah.
Same time tomorrow, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.